Just let us know quickly, Ben, about you, your background, exactly what you just said. I apologize for having you do it again, but I don't want to leave that out before we jump into the rest of the stream.
Yeah, no problems. Yeah, what I was saying, yeah, I'm Ben. I do the signal processing end of what we do here at Aberrant. So like I code our plugins to make them sound the way they do. Me and Dan got started doing this right out of college. We went to college together at University of Rochester, and we made the first version of Sketch Cassette for our senior design project, and then just started selling it online. And then it kind of took off much more than we expected. We weren't really planning to start a plugin company right out of school, but here we are.
That's so cool. That's what, 2 years ago, man. So you've come a long way in 2 years, and that's great to like make your first plugin as your project. Do you know what I mean? And then just come out, essentially come out swinging. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Danny, what about you? What is your role in the company, and any other background information we know before moving forward here?
Sure. Yeah. So as I said before, but you couldn't hear me, I do all of the non-DSP related stuff with Aberrant DSP. So I called myself a software designer, which is a very vague term, but essentially it means I do a lot of the big picture stuff, a lot of how the plugin works and how the user interacts with it. I design the user interface, and then I also do a lot of the marketing. So I kind of had to teach myself how running a plugin company works and how to sell software, because like Ben said, we made this as a senior project at our school. So to kind of come right out from that and start a plugin company, there was a lot to learn off the bat. Yeah.
I'm just getting a message from Joel here. Well, I mean, that, like I said, is absolutely incredible. You said you do the UI, some development there. Are you the person who has actually designed the UI itself, like the Sketch Cassette? You did the sketch?
I did all of it, yeah.
Oh, my hats off to you, because that is an incredible looking plugin.
Thank you.
I like when a plugin looks appetizing before even jumping in, and both of your plugins absolutely do that. Sketch Cassette obviously seems to be around a sketch. Like, I mean, that's just, it looks like a sketch in terms of the UI, but Shapeshifter kind of reminds me of like an artist, and I don't know which artist it would be, but did you take inspiration from somewhere on that?
Not really. I think for Shapeshifter, I had a different version of the user interface that I was working on for a while, but it just wasn't clicking. And I remember one day I just took some time off, just scrolling through Google Photo, just trying to get inspiration from anything. I think I must have stumbled upon a painting or a collage I found on Instagram maybe. And I can't even remember quite what it was, but I got the idea for the shapes, and I just started painting. I think I must have like 6 or 7 different variations of just shapes. And I kind of cobbled them all together into what is now the UI.
What are you designing those in?
So for both Sketch Cassette and Shapeshifter, they were both done by hand. So obviously with Shapeshifter was acrylic paints on like canvas paper, and Sketch Cassette was just pen and pencil and colored pencil. And so I do a lot of the design, all on paper, and then I scan them in and use Photoshop, and then most of my job ends up being in the code, kind of integrating the different images, what end up as being PNGs into the program.
Well, I mean, like I said, everybody at Plugin Boutique, we actually, and Rob Jones, I don't know if you watched any of our streams with Rob Jones, but I think in the Christmas stream, we were talking about Sketch Cassette, and it was a big highlight just about how beautiful it looks. Never mind how great it sounds in the end. It's just, it's a really, it's a unique approach to it. And like I said, if it's visually interesting, it makes me want to bring up the plugin, even if I don't know how I'm going to use it yet, just so I can look at it. So yeah, that's really cool.
When we first started, we thought about doing kind of like what everybody else does, making it look like a hardware cassette deck. And then pretty quickly we realized that's kind of boring. Well, it's not that it's boring, but it's been done a million times, and it ended up being sort of an accident that I had sketched out a planned layout for the plugin, just to get a good sense of where the knobs were going to be and everything. And we showed it to, I think, a professor who ended up saying, "Why don't you just make that the UI?" And we're like,
credit to him. Nice one.
Yeah.
Nice one. Good. Yeah.
So,
I mean, that's teachers, man. They come in handy quite often.
Yes.
So
they do.
Ben, you said you handle the DSP. I don't know if you mentioned DSP before in the first intro you did about yourself when no one could hear what you were saying. But you handle most of the heavy lifting on the DSP side. What does that mean in general for what you do day to day, and also what does just DSP mean in general? I'm not sure everybody completely knows. I'm not even sure I completely know. So if you can catch me up on that terminology, that would be absolutely helpful.
Yeah, so DSP just stands for digital signal processing. So that's basically that's why I do like the parts of our plugin that there's these blocks of code where you're just getting your samples in from whatever DAW you're in, and every plugin has just this block of code that does all this math and does all this fancy stuff, and that's where I spend 90% of my time when I'm working. I work a bit on some of the other technical stuff for our plugins, things like the preset system and making installers and some other technical stuff. But most of it is just, turning whatever idea me and Dan have for, a sound we want to create or, some sort of effect or processing, figuring out how to actually, what math needs to be done, how to do it, and how to make it feasible for, real-time audio effects without completely bogging down your computer and all that.
That's cool. So you're doing the design of how the plugin processes audio completely in text-based format?
Yeah.
Or is it something closer to Max for Live where you have certain elements that you slide in and then they are tweakable and you can improve or change the math behind them? What's going on there?
It's all just standard. It's just straight coding in C++, using this framework called Juice, JUCE, which is very popular for audio plugins, kind of like the main framework everyone uses. So yeah, it's all just plain old text-based coding, but things like Juice, the big thing people use it for is it comes with kind of these pre-made blocks of code. So it in a sense, there's a bit of, I'll just, take this piece over here and then, modify it or, tell this one block that I didn't make, but tell this one block to do a specific thing in this certain context. And then, stringing a bunch of that stuff together, adding some of our own stuff. Basically ends up being how that works.
Very cool. Now, obviously, you're both very talented at the DSP side of things, coding and artistically as well. Are you both musicians? I see a guitar there behind you, Ben. Are you both musicians as well? What kind of music are you working on these days?
So yeah, we're both musicians. I guess I've been more active on the music making side than Ben has recently. But I am a pianist and a composer in the kind of modern classical realm. I love the online community for that scene. And yeah, I just work and it's purely a hobby, nothing I ever monetize. But I play piano and make music under the artist name Still Life.
Okay, so people can check you out on Spotify or something?
Yeah,
there's links on our site. Yeah,
on our site. Yeah, Ben also has made beautiful music in the past.
Not in a long time. Yeah, I used to write songs and mostly just guitar based stuff. I play drums too, but yeah, just have been focusing more on the Aberrant stuff lately, but obviously it's still comes into play a lot, like with our like introducing Sketch Cassette or introducing Shapeshifter videos. Me and Dan just like sit down together and like write a little minute long little song, which is always fun.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun with those.
Yeah, but yeah, definitely having a musician's background. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a plugin developer who isn't also a musician.
It's funny that you say that. The main developer behind Scalar, I believe, isn't a musician, but he has. He has a music theory plugin that is one of the best on the market. It's just, it's. Wow. You might be surprised. You never know.
Yeah.
Because music theory, when it's boiled down, is just math. So if you've got that strong math background and you're okay with just looking at numbers, but that brings kind of leads me in almost a segue into our first video. You guys made 2 videos for us today, kind of introductions to the 2 plugins that you have available on pluginboutique.com. And the first video we're going to show today is Sketch Cassette 2, which was made by Daniel. And the first thing I noticed in your video, Daniel, was that beautiful piano that you had as an example. Is that something that you actually played out?
Yeah, that was a clip I just stole from the last album that I made. So I was looking around for piano tracks to demo Sketch Cassette on, and
if that's a taste of your music, then I will be clicking that Spotify link, because it was just automatically stood out. I was like, what is that? And I could see that it was clearly an audio sample from somewhere, and I was like, what is that? So, Joel, if you want to go ahead and just set up, Daniel, the clip that we're about to watch on Sketch Cassette 2, what we can expect, and then we'll jump back in. And people, if you have any questions for Daniel or for Ben about Sketch Cassette 2, now is your time to ask. And when we come back from the video, we'll go ahead and jump into those questions and talk a little bit more in depth about Sketch Cassette 2 specifically. But if you want to let us know what we're about to watch, Daniel, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, sure. So I think the obvious thing about Sketch Cassette that most people know is that it's a cassette emulation. So I didn't want to spend 5 minutes in a video kind of explaining how Sketch Cassette emulates a cassette, because we designed it to do that first and foremost. But our mission statement, I guess, as a company is to never make just a simple, like, one-trick plugin. We want it to be able to be used to its extremes, to inspire creativity in other ways and not just like one single way. We want it to be each effect, like in the case of Sketch Cassette, each effect that Sketch Cassette can make, we want to be able to use individually and kind of experimented individually. So for example, the wow and flutter controls, it's not just to emulate cassette wow and flutter, but you can use it for all sorts of weird modulations. So I think I have three examples in the video that we're about to watch of just how I like to use Sketch Cassette as not just making it sound like a crappy cassette. So yeah.
All right, perfect. Joel, if you want to go ahead and run the video, let people watch, and then we'll be right back after the video.
Hey there, this is Daniel from Aberrant DSP. Today I'm going to be showing you a few of my favorite ways to use our plugin Sketch Cassette. We designed this plugin to work well as both a simple cassette tape emulation, but also to be used as a creative and unusual effect to experiment and have fun with. So one way that I love using Sketch Cassette is on a reverb send. This effect works great for any sort of lead instrument or vocal. In this case, I've got a piano track that I can show it on. I send the piano to a separate track with a reverb on it. In this case, I have Little Plate by Soundtoys pulled up. I load in Sketch Cassette on the send track after the reverb, and the first thing I do is I turn the noise reduction compression on. The reason I think that the compression sounds great after a reverb is because the NR comp algorithm combines both upward and downward compression, so not only does it compress the signal, but it also boosts all the quieter, higher frequency content in the reverb tail, making it sound very bright and sparkly. also add a decent amount of dropouts to give it some of that wonderful cassette weirdness and really degrade the sound. Maybe a touch of wow and flutter as well, and a bit of saturation. Now we can blend it in with the original audio to add this bizarre atmospheric effect without distorting or distracting from the original recording. The second Sketch Cassette method I use a lot is to use it as a very watery, colorful chorus type effect. The wow and flutter section has a lot of fun ways to experiment with all sorts of wacky modulation, and the flanging control that mixes the modulated signal with the unmodulated signal can be used for a very pretty, almost psychedelic effect. Here's a rather straightforward synth pad that I can showcase this on. So already there's a lot more movement and color to what would otherwise be a very boring synth pad. Again, Sketch Cassette was designed to get weird, so if you're looking for some otherworldly pitch effects to use on a track, you can start pushing the wow and flutter controls to their extremes. I love using the FM mode, which turns the wow controls into a modulator for the flutter controls. So you can get some pretty bizarre sounding effects. Lastly, a trick that I love using Sketch Cassette for is to use the dropouts at the end of a song to make it sound as if it's falling apart or slowly disintegrating. I'll often do this as it's fading out at the very tail end. So for this effect, I pull up Sketch Cassette on the master track, and I'll keep all the controls at 0, bypass the filters, and all I'll do is turn the dropout intensity all the way up, and then pull up automation for the dropout depth. There it is. And so as the song is fading out, I'll just slowly bring in the dropouts. I'm always looking for interesting ways to end songs, and I feel like that's a really fun and unique way to do it. So that's all for my demo today. I hope you've learned something, or at least feel inspired to play around with Sketch Cassette yourself and come up with your own unique ways to use it in a track. So thank you for watching.
All right. So we've just played the Sketch Cassette 2 video from Daniel. Again, big shout out about the design of the plugin and that beautiful piano piece that you use.
Thank you.
Anyone who's watching, if you have any questions for either one of these guys about Sketch Cassette 2, now is the time to put it in the chat. Also, Sketch Cassette 2 is actually on sale right now on pluginboutique.com. There's a link in the chat, so go ahead and click that if you want to check it out. I have a question, though, and my question is about, you said in your video you didn't want to jump into the tape emulations, but I am just immensely curious about how you got those emulations. Like, did you go out and find the tapes? You guys use tape 1, 2, and 4, I believe, as emulations inside of Sketch Cassette. Can you talk to me a little bit about what it was like even trying to find those tapes? Is that something you just find on eBay? And then what was the process of garnering the information that you need to be able to emulate that in a VST form?
Yeah. So yeah, we basically just at least for Sketch Cassette 2, we did a mix of looking on eBay mainly for specific like new old stock tapes, like still, in the wrapping. And we just bought a ton of them. Like we bought, I think, roughly a dozen different, brands, and, different models of each type. And then just profiled them all. And
I went to Record Archive in Rochester too and bought like 30 or so. Just digging through those crates. That was a lot of fun.
What do you see? You say you profile them. Can you be even more specific? Like, what does that mean, and what does that entail to profile? Obviously, you could see the frequency response curve on some things, but what exactly is going on with the profiling?
So all it really was we took what's called an impulse response of all of these tapes, and you might recognize that from like a convolution reverb plugin, or even some like guitar emulations will have like impulse responses of cabs, or in the case of a reverb, it would be like of a room, and all that really is you're just like for our tapes, we just sent out from our computer just a single sample, just a little tiny click, and if you record that to a tape and then play it back and record that how it is on the tape back into the computer, you actually capture all the information about how the tape, that specific tape, responds to every frequency across the spectrum, and then from there we basically take the samples from the recording that we get back from the tape, and then use the values of those samples as little coefficients in a filter. And that's basically all it is. It really kind of, long story short, you just you get, it's basically just a recording from the tape of a single sample, and then you send everything that's going through the plugin through a filter that just recreates that exact same profile. So we did that for probably almost 40 tapes, I think, and then just kind of picked ones that we thought kind of covered the broadest territory. Like we wanted the biggest difference between like type 1 cheap and type 4 master quality as we could get. So we just profiled a bunch, and then tried to pick some unique ones that appealed to us.
So when you have the cheap and expensive, did you manipulate that yourself, or did you actually have cheap and expensive tapes to play through?
So it was that was a bit of an abstraction, but we had all sorts of like really crappy low quality tapes, like some really worn out tapes too, as well as some like really high quality, still in the packaging from like the late 80s, some of those. But what we did find was tapes would sometimes, a certain tape would either fail to meet, or it would exceed our expectations of it. So like some of the tapes that we were like, oh, this one's gonna sound so crappy, it'll be great, were like actually fine. So we didn't end up using them. And then conversely, some of the more expensive, hard to find ones were just terrible. So we did kind of abstract things a bit. Like each tape at each quality level has this unique drawing for it, and all those drawings were based off of a lot of the tapes that we had, that we got from to profile. But a lot of times the profile and the drawing, about half the time, aren't actually aligned behind the scenes. Like we kind of just picked drawings that were based on tapes that our initial impression looking at the tape was, oh, this is a cheap type 1 tape.
Aesthetics first.
So it's a bit of an abstraction, but they generally do actually follow a trend of cheaper and lower quality up through higher quality.
Very cool. Can you just briefly walk me through the jump from Sketch Cassette 1 to Sketch Cassette 2? Like, what were the new features that were added? What were some changes that you decided you needed to make? What's different between the two versions? I've never seen Sketch Cassette 1, so I don't know. So if you could fill me in on what was changed and maybe your thought process on why changing it and why adding these other features were the way to go.
Sure. So yeah, the first and foremost thing is Sketch Cassette 1 only had 3 tapes to choose from. So we wanted to expand the options for that to 12. So that was kind of the first plan of attack. The next thing we did was we were very responsive to requests we got from people who use Sketch Cassette 1. We just got tons of DMs from people. Anytime we heard suggestions, we took note of them, and that led to things like we included tempo sync for the WoW and Flutter, which is obviously something that would never happen with a real cassette, but could be very useful if you're making electronic music or any type of music that you wanted the modulation to really be in sync with the rest of the instruments and the rest of the track. So thought that would be a useful thing. But yeah, we essentially just expanded every section. We thought of it kind of like we were making the products that we originally wanted to make. Like Sketch Cassette 1 was done for a school project, so obviously we had limitations on time and resources. So now we felt that we could go back and really give it more thought, give it a lot more, each section more time. We made new profiles for the saturation. So we had 2 types of saturation. We wanted the dropout feature to be continuous from mono, so like just both channels having the same dropouts, to stereo, where there was the most separation between the dropouts on the 2 channels. The compression section for the noise reduction emulation, that we wanted to have more control, so there's added control for brightness and amount, and then the mix, so the dry wet mix for the compression. And a bunch of new features for the WoW and Flutter section, which again, not really based off of real life cassettes, but we thought would be fun for experimenting and getting new sounds.
Well, and they are fun. I mean, why I wouldn't expect you to like completely stay 100% true. I mean, that's what the beauty of taking these analog pieces of gear and putting them into a VST. That's like what makes it awesome. Mm-hmm. So did you get an A on the project?
I don't know, did we?
I can't remember. I mean, I think we did fine. We definitely passed.
I remember cramming for the final paper.
Yeah, because that was kind of. I think we had an impressive project. I think our advisors and everything liked the plugin, but certain. Like the actual final paper and the things we're actually getting graded on probably could have used more work. We were more jazzed about the thing that we made instead of the assignment we were working on. But yeah, and
Go ahead.
We got some throughout the whole process of the whole thing. We were always getting when we'd explain our project to like some of the staff and faculty at school, like the more senior professors in our department, they'd be like, okay, I mean, I guess I don't know why you'd want to make this emulation and have it be hand drawn, but like a lot of kind of like curious, confused looks. But yeah,
there was one guy at our when we did our presentation, the senior design presentation, people would walk around. I think there was
like a big science fair kind of.
One guy that just stood there for a while, like shaking his head, like, this sounds terrible. Why would you ever want something to sound like this? Like, we spent so many years trying to get, music to not sound like this.
Yeah, hilarious.
The
guy who wrote the business plan for FedEx at Harvard Business School famously got a C on his business plan, and now supposedly it hangs in his office with a C, awesome. I told you so. So yeah, I mean, people don't know. Obviously, I mean, what you're doing is pretty niche in terms of what's out there in the world. But I mean, you guys had the vision and pulled it off amazingly. So that's awesome. There was a question in the chat about how many of the features in Shapeshifter are also in Sketch Cassette? And that's actually a question I have here written down. Was in your video, you say that the compressor is both upwards and downwards compression, or compression and expansion. And I was curious if that algorithm was borrowed from, or was from Shapeshifter, or taken, or the other way around, but if they were the same algorithms.
Yeah, so yeah, basically, yeah, the NR comp on Sketch Cassette, when we were coding that, we did it wrong and didn't realize until like way later. But then we were like, hey, this sounds cool. It's weird, but the whole upward and downward compression aspect of it came from just a mistake in our code. That took us a while to catch.
we were sitting across the table from each other, and I was trying to like put the code in for just the crude code for the compressor in to get it started when we were working on our senior project. And I was like, hey, Ben, is this right? And I think he was half involved in something else and just glanced at it. I was like, yeah. And we just didn't notice. We didn't notice that. Like I completely left something out, but it ended up, sounding cool. So sometimes that happens, and we made it work a bit better and fixed all the bugs that came with it. And then, developed it into Shapeshifter later on.
And just kind of took that. It's kind of a weird concept of like upward and downward at the same time. And just took that basic aspect, which was, from the NR comp on Sketch Cassette, and just kind of really tried to explore that as much as we could with different controls.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue into the next video, which is from you, Ben, on Shapeshifter. If you want to just set us up and let us know what we can expect from the video, and then we'll go ahead and play it for everybody. Sure.
So yeah, we get a lot of questions about how Shapeshifter really works, because it's strange, and there's all these knobs, and like it's kind of hard to tell what's going on sometimes. So I just I briefly wanted to just kind of explain more how the controls relate to what's kind of going on under the hood, just so for people who want to get more out of Shapeshifter and really kind of get to know it and be able to tweak everything and know what they're doing with it, just so people feel more comfortable. And then I had a couple of examples just to kind of illustrate the stuff I talk about.
All right, sounds good. Joel, if you want to go ahead and play that video, and then we'll come back, we'll talk about it in Shapeshifter. We're coming up next. Joel, go ahead and run the Shapeshifter video.
Hey everyone, I'm Ben, one of the co-founders of Aberrant DSP. I do a lot of the DSP coding that makes our plugins sound the way they do. I'm just going to talk a bit about our compressor plugin here, Shapeshifter, today. I want to start off by just kind of explaining how it works a little bit. We get a lot of questions from customers just like, this thing's cool, I like the controls, but like I don't really know how it's working. I want to get better at it, I want to master it, whatever. And the best piece of advice I have for people who want to get more out of Shapeshifter is click on this little user manual button right here. This is like installed locally when you install Shapeshifter, and it basically has all the info you need to really take full advantage of it, or at least, that's what we're shooting for. So the way Shapeshifter works is shown most clearly kind of by this gain meter here. Now, for a typical compressor, you'd have a gain reduction meter. You'll see here, though, that there's gain reduction, these negative gain values here, but there's also a gain boost. That's because Shapeshifter uses both upward compression, which boosts lower levels, and downward compression, which is, what you're used to, where it clamps peaks down to a certain level. So these graphs right here illustrate how the compression curves in Shapeshifter work. So you'll see this big main ratio knob, and this curve kind of illustrates what that's doing. It sets the downward ratio, which is here, and the upward ratio here together. So they kind of pivot around the transience threshold, which you set with this little knob right here. So for the default preset, this is set to -18 dB. This ratio, big ratio, is set to 1.5 to 1. So the downward and upward compression will both work on that ratio. So there's also this transience ratio knob, and what that does is adjusts the downward compression ratio relative to the overall ratio. You can kind of see that on this graph. So the ratio here 4.5 to 1 is what's going on this big knob, and that's always going to be the ratio for the upward compression part of it. But the transients ratio, you could adjust from 2 to 1 all the way up to like 22 to 1. So you could have a whole variety of stuff going on here. There's one last control which has kind of a big effect on all of this, which is the floor control. You can see here that wherever you set the floor level to, the upward compression will stop acting at that point. Mainly it's just to control background noise, control how low down you want the upward compression to work. So with that, I'm just going to go through a few examples that kind of showcase how this unique type of upward and downward compression can kind of quickly get you to some sounds that would be much harder to accomplish, even with a combination of upward and downward compressors on their own. So the first example I have is this little drum loop here. This is just a snare, a kick, and 2 overheads put into a bus. They have some light processing on them, just some EQ and a little bit of compression on the kick and snare. But I don't have a room mic for these drums, and you can kind of tell. Kind of a dry sound, you know, you're getting a little bit of room from the overheads, but say I wanted to make this roomier, for whatever reason, to fit whatever song I was putting this in. So what Shapeshifter can do is kind of turn my overheads into a combination of overhead and room mic. So if we pop it on right here, I'm going to solo the overheads. So that's off. You can already hear a lot more room sound kind of creeping its way in. I'm going to go to a drum preset, this huge and punchy. Obviously very extreme. But I'll start here and just kind of dial things back until I get an amount of room sound that I want. The first thing I'm going to do for that, just turn this ratio down. Even very low ratios, because Shapeshifter acts on almost the whole dynamic range of a signal, even small ratios really can make a big difference. Turn this up a little bit more. And if I adjust the floor here, you see how it almost acts like a room sound knob. It just sounds like the room aspect of the overhead sound is getting louder and quieter. So I'll dial that in. That's kind of light. I like that for this. I'll mess with these a little. Let the peaks come through a little bit more. So I won't mess with the downward compression at all. I'm liking that this is a kind of upward compression heavy setting, because that's what's pulling all the room sound up without, you know, squashing down the peaks too much and making it lose the punch of the drum hits. I'm also going to add just a little bit of drive here. I just like kind of a gritty room mic. Yeah, it makes the snare sound a little beefier. And now really last thing to do is mess with the dry wet mix. This is 100% wet, but if I lower it, yeah, even just a subtle amount like that, we're only at about 15%, adds a little bit of room in without losing the kind of close feel of the overheads. It almost sounds like multiple mics. So altogether, you can really kind of hear that these drums are in a room, and I didn't even put a room mic up. This can apply for all sorts of stuff. We like using Shapeshifter after a reverb if you really want to kind of pull more of the reverb out. Because it's a dynamic effect, it can make it so the reverb really comes and fills in space when the sound is quiet, but it doesn't get in the way when the sound is louder and there's more things going on. So the second example I wanted to show you is just this little Wurlitzer loop. Just a software instrument. Sounds pretty good, but pretty dry, you know. Sounds like, you know, maybe a close mic'd cab or something. And with Shapeshifter, I just want to make it grittier, make it more in your face. So we'll turn this on the Keys Shimmery preset. see that brings out a lot more high end, makes it a little more percussive. There's a little bit of drive on here too, just to kind of warm things up. But we can really push this to the extreme if we want. Really let the peaks through and really crank the ratio and lower the floor. Let's lower the release. So between these notes, you'll hear how the kind of decay of the notes and the reverb that's on the keyboard rushes in to kind of fill the dead space. But you can barely even hear that there's reverb on it when the notes are first, plonked down. And then, of course, we can drive this like crazy. That's it's a little crazy. And we can, play with the dry wet. Well, that's pretty much it for me. I'm looking forward to your questions, and thanks so much for tuning in.
I love the beep that lets us know we're back. So yeah, that was a quick look at Shapeshifter. Is there anything you wanted to say above and beyond the video, Ben, that maybe you didn't get to fit inside there? Or just gave us, anything at all?
I guess just about general, I guess how we tend to recommend that people approach it. It definitely can be like weird and like kind of intimidating and just confusing. But we like to tell people just to, start with the preset, just like, with any other plugin, and then pay the most attention to the biggest knobs, like the big ratio knob right in the middle, tone knob, dry wet, and, play with attack and release and stuff. But like the smaller stuff, like the little transient knobs, like the transient threshold, and even stuff like the floor, like, just play it by ear and, slowly figure it out. But most of the big changes in sound that you can get with Shapeshifter and the big adjustments are with like especially those two main knobs up top, the tone and the ratio.
Someone's asking if the tone knob is a tilt EQ.
It's basically, yeah, but it's a little more complicated than that. It's a tilt EQ, but it also affects some of the compression parameters behind the scenes. It compresses the low end or the high end more and less depending on which direction. So yeah, it just boosts the level with a tilt EQ, but also like if you have it all the way to the left, the low end is being compressed more heavily by a little bit.
Also, it's got upward. Is it upward expansion or upward compression? Because
upward compression, yeah.
Upward compression is a strange set of words to put next to each other. Can you
Yes.
I mean, you might have touched on it in the video, but can you maybe just explain a little bit more, or just for me who didn't get to hear the video because of the delay, just what is upward compression and just what is it? And how is it different than expansion?
Yeah, so downward compression, which everyone's familiar with, just plain old compression. You have your like threshold here and your ratio, and it pushes anything that goes above the threshold, it pushes down towards the threshold. Upward compression is just that same thing but flipped. So like you'll have the threshold, and then anything that falls underneath the threshold gets pushed up towards it according to the ratio. So, a downward compressor makes the loud parts of a sound quieter, which usually allows you to turn the whole thing up, because it catches the peaks. But an upper compressor makes quiet sounds louder. And it's fiddly because of that, because like with, as you can imagine, if you have like a noise floor, once the sounds get, it gets quiet enough, the noise is going to get pushed up more and more and more, which is what our floor control is there to address. Like it just kind of sets the cutoff point where the upper compression stops boosting things. And then expansion, like upward expansion would be if you don't really hear about it because it would be if so you have your threshold, and then anything that goes above the threshold gets boosted louder. So it would be kind of doing the opposite of what downward compression does. Like it would make the peaks even louder and peakier, which, as you can imagine, there's not too much use for that. But yeah.
That's okay. Thank you for explaining that for me.
Yeah.
I just have a sort of question in general, and that is, if someone were looking to get into plugin development who don't plan on attending a university or a college in Rochester, New York, for example, do you what is a good approach to it, and how do you feel about something like Max for Live? And I believe there's a Native Instruments one where you can really get in and kind of create your own, a reactor, I believe it is.
Yeah.
Where you can get in and kind of take pre-made modules and string them together to get an effect. What is your view on that? And maybe a little bit about if that isn't a good starting position, where should people go?
Yeah, those things can definitely be a great kind of like a gateway, get you familiar with, how stringing these small little blocks together works. Kind of like how I touched on earlier, like even when you're doing, C++, text-based coding, doing this stuff, you're still stringing a lot of blocks together, and letting them interact with each other. I think it's handy for a tool on a high conceptual level, just to get you used to, the types of processing, on the low level that you'll have at your fingertips. But I definitely, we get emails about this sometimes, and I always kind of tell people, the sooner you can start doing things in more text-based traditional coding, the better. And there are a lot of ways that you can do that without diving right into C++ and all that, which can be very intimidating. And also can just be really slow for, early prototyping, just figuring out what you want to make. But, things like MATLAB, if you have access to that through school, which I know a lot of people do. MATLAB's expensive if you don't get it through school, but there's great alternatives to it.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, we got started on MATLAB just because we got it for free through school, but there's things that do basically the same stuff. Like there's actually a open source program called Octave, I believe, that is designed to be, I think it's mostly compatible with MATLAB code, but it's free. And there's all sorts of, community made modules for it. So that can be really handy. Or another easy and free place to start is Python. Python's one of the easiest programming languages to learn. There's tons of resources for learning it out there. And it's also really great and popular for basically, scientific computing, prototyping things. It's really easy in Python to, if you want to see what, the curve of a filter is going to look like, or a saturation curve that you're trying to use. It's really easy to plot that stuff through Python or whatever, and get some visual feedback and get a better picture of what you're doing. Then with with C++, a lot of it can feel like you're just going in blind. But yeah, I just start with something a little easier. But I always say text-based, as soon as you feel comfortable with that, is usually the way to go, because it's a lot easier to go from, say, Python and then put that all into a proper plugin in C++ than it is to go from Max and then just try coding in C++,
Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. So how much of a focus should math be before even beginning to get into the coding? Where should you begin? I guess, would you start with math and get a good handle on that before you jump in, or maybe jump in with coding and then do the math as needed, or Is there an approach there that might be helpful for people looking to get into it?
I guess I personally have always had a hard time with just pure math, just like, trying to just study math, figure out the math first. Like, I have a lot easier time knowing what the concept is and then figuring out the math kind of but while remaining grounded in, what it is, what actual thing I'm going to be using this for.
With a goal in mind.
Yeah. No, exactly.
That's definitely the easier way to do it.
Yeah. And sorry, what was I saying? Yeah, I think it's, but there are a lot of great books out there that kind of, teach you the math as you need it and kind of explain the math through the broader concepts, which I definitely think is good. Because with the real math behind a lot of signal processing is some of the more complex math out there. It's really kind of complicated, but you can we do that, we do this stuff every day and are never constantly thinking of the nitty gritty math. Like, sometimes we need to dive that deep if we're really trying to do something weird, but most of it is just getting what's happening on a big picture scale. And, then there are tons of resources out there to figure out how to put that into code and all that. So yeah, I think just a broader approach while keeping the math in mind is usually good.
Nice. Absolutely. So we're pretty much wrapping up now. It's been an hour. I know you're busy. Hopefully cooking up another plugin, which is a question that was in the chat. If you could maybe tease anything that's coming up, the next one or the next version of something. People like to know the inside track on things, and obviously most companies and manufacturers are like, obviously we're not going to tell you. But if you could just tease something, if you wanted to, anything coming up that we should, or just have a date or a month in mind for checking out Aberrant DSP.
Well, Ben's over here plugging away at a pitch shifter piece of code that's going to be might be included in our new plugin, so I can tease that.
And with that said, the pitch shifter is a kind of a small piece of the puzzle, so it might be a while.
Hey, one piece at a time, man. That's how you do it.
Yeah. We have some dates in mind, but hopefully sooner rather than later. But yeah, rest assured, we're working on something. We're excited about it. We think people will like it.
Another question about plugins in general. I make a lot of videos, and I see a lot of comments on YouTube, and the comments by some people are like, "Oh my gosh, another EQ,"
mm-hmm.
And as I understand it, every single EQ, unless someone has been stealing code, is going to be different in some way, right? Whether it be how quickly whether or not the slope is a perfect slope, or if it's coloring something somewhere, or whatever. What would you say if you put out an EQ and someone came to you and said, "Why should I buy this? It's just another EQ." There are so many EQs out there in the world. Is there? I'm guessing there is, but maybe you know more obviously than I do about differences between certain things like that.
I don't know. Yeah, it's. I guess I'd say I'm almost kind of inclined to agree that there are too many EQs out there. But yeah, obviously there's going to be some differences under the hood. But yeah, it's say, I guess in the hypothetical where we were to put out an EQ, I think we just want it really to be something upfront and obvious that makes it different. And there's plenty of EQs that do that. I think with something like an EQ, some of the best ways that's done is just through the user interface and the experience, much more than the actual sound. Because a lot of for something like a parametric EQ, for analog modeling EQs and stuff, that's kind of a different story, because there definitely will be differences, different approaches to recreating them. And but with something like a parametric EQ, the underlying, the actual, the code, the little blocks that are, making each filter that you draw, those are gonna be almost the same. The point is for them to be almost the same no matter who's making them. If they're doing a good job at it, they're all going to be transparent. And some people, will do a better job than others, and have a more transparent EQ, or a more flexible EQ, better on processing, stuff like that. But the one I always think of is when I got that FabFilter Pro Q.
Mm-hmm.
I was like in high school, and I was like, do I really need to spend money on a EQ when I have one right in my DAW? But then I got it, and like sonically, I mean, I'm sure there's small differences under the hood, but the main thing that I realized about was just, and made me feel like it was worth spending the money, was it's so much easier to approach. It's so much more flexible, and that's all on the user experience end. And they do a bunch behind the scenes to make it, really low on CPU and all that stuff too. But yeah, I guess like overall, it's like if you're going to make a EQ or you're going to make a compressor, like if we were to do that, we'd want it to really be obviously different in a meaningful way, Yeah. And I like if we didn't, put effort into differentiating it, I wouldn't be surprised, if people are like, why should I get this? Because if we don't have a clear answer to that, you can't really blame people for asking. And that it kind of like that's what we were thinking with Shapeshifter. Like it's another character compressor. There are a ton of those out there, but that's why we wanted it to be kind of this weird approach, with upward and downward, and just something different to try.
No, 100%. And the reason why I bring it up, because I see the comments all the time, but like all FabFilter's stuff, especially the V3s that have been coming out, mm-hmm. visually stunning. And not only that, but they're visually helping you to like do your routing now or see what's been modulated where. And it's beautiful to look at, but it's also giving you information about what's happening in the plugin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also say that, when I get a FabFilter plugin for a premium price point, I imagine that the code is as tight as possible, like you were saying. It's going to run smoothly. It's not going to be a drain, as opposed to a $5-10 one where it's just GitHub EQ filter code pasted onto some sort of strange GUI. You know what I mean? Is that even a thing, like where you can just jump on GitHub and get, a low pass filter code and throw it on something?
Oh yeah, yeah, and like because all the basic building blocks, just your simple filters and stuff. Everyone's using basically the same stuff. The actual code and the specific approach might be different, but the mathematical equation it's representing and all that's been around since the 60s or before, and that's all just the same concept that everyone's reusing over and over. And that's the kind of type of thing where at the end of the day, unless you're inventing a new filter, which requires mathematical genius beyond what I possess, you're not going to have too much of a difference with something like an EQ under the hood, unless you're really pushing the bounds of, DSP itself, like the actual science of it,
Okay. Well, I mean, I just wanted to, I see the comments, and I hope you've addressed, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But that is,
no, definitely. Yeah,
I mean, absolutely. So, I mean, that's pretty much it on the for the stream today. Fellas, if there's anything specific that you want to say just here while we're wrapping up, obviously go check out Aberrant DSP on Plugin Boutique. Sketch Cassette 2 is on sale right now. If you don't have it, you should have it. It's a phenomenal piece of kit. Looks good, sounds good, does everything you wanted to and more. But if there's anything else you wanted to let the community know, now is the time. No?
I get if you want a T-shirt, we have some on sale on our website. Just with Dan's wearing one. I think you still can't see him, but yeah.
Oh, that's terrible. Wait a minute. Is it the logo or is it Sketch Cassette? Because I might want a Sketch Cassette T-shirt.
Yeah, I have just the logo. We have logo ones just for ourselves. But yeah, there's you can see them on our site. There's just
cassettes.
Yeah, a little shirt with like 6 of the Sketch Cassette cassettes on it. So if they're comfy, if you want one, want to rep
merch.
Yeah, if you want to rep
we
plugins
need merch at Plugin
yourself.
Boutique, I think.
Yeah,
but
mostly
so
for
go
fans.
Check it out. Also on your website, you can find links to your music on Spotify and other places. But yeah, definitely check out Aberrant DSP. Subscribe to Plugin Boutique because as they release new plugins, obviously we're going to be covering it in our video content. But gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time. Sorry for the rough start with people not being able to hear you, and sorry for the continued issue with no one being able to see Daniel. Daniel, but luckily we could hear you, and you had nothing but a wealth of information to give to us today. So thank you again for coming by, and hopefully we can do this again next time you have a plugin to share.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you for having us.
Sure. Yeah, thanks so much.
Fun.
All right, fellas. So I'll see you next time. And everybody in the chat, we'll see you next time too.